Recent chatter and straight up vitriol surrounding Blue Ivy and Bronny James as it pertains to the conversation about them being Nepo babies has really made me wonder if y'all have an issue with nepotism or you have an issue with nepotism now that it is finally benefiting Black children. Let's talk about it. Aloha, beautiful humans. Welcome to my channel. If you are new here, welcome back if we've been locked in. My name is Sasha, and today I'm talking about nepotism, but more specifically, the type of vitriolic commentary and conversation surrounding nepotism now that we're seeing nepotism benefit a very specific type of person in a way that we are usually not used to seeing. So first and foremost, before we get into the conversation, y'all like my glasses? I decided to put them on today. Normally I record with my contacts, but honestly, I just wasn't feeling it. So you get glasses, Sasha, today. It's a vibe. But anyways, so before we get into this video, y'all know I am a big words mean things person. So just so we're working off of the same definition, so we're working on the same page, let's quickly define what nepotism is. Nepotism is the practice among those with power or influence favoring relatives, friends, or associates, especially by giving them jobs. Or another definition that I have seen, nepotism is the unfair use of power in order to get jobs or other benefits for your family or friends. A few years ago, New York Magazine released a really great article about nepotism and Nepo babies in the industry, and they called it the year of a Nepo baby. I thought that article was hilarious. It definitely stepped on some toes, and the final boss of tone deaf entitled Nepo babies, Jamie Lee Curtis, obviously had something to say about it. That was a few years ago, and the conversation surrounding Nepo babies in Hollywood has kind of died down. However, it has been on the rise in light of Bronny James getting into the lead, and more recently with Blue Ivy performing at the Beyonce Bowl with her mom, freaking Beyonce. And in all honesty, I had not seen that yet. I was in Nigeria when it aired and I need to watch it, but I've seen the photos from the performance. I've seen some videos. I actually got tickets to see Renaissance and I saw Blue Ivy perform there and I thought she did a pretty great job. However, of course, when it comes to Beyonce and now extension Blue Ivy, people are always gonna have something to say, and a lot of people were critiquing Blue Ivy, saying that she was only given that opportunity or she was only performing because Beyonce was her mom. And listen, before we get into this video, I have no issue with nepotism. And in all honesty, I feel like you only have an issue with nepotism if you believe in the great myth and the great lie of meritocracy that the United States has done a great job of brainwashing people into thinking exists. But there is no single space or industry that exists today that people are getting ahead as a result of meritocracy. Even in sports, which I do think is the last, one of the few remaining bastions of meritocracy. And I think that is why Bronny James making it into the NBA has become such a point of contention, because that is one of the last spaces where you would think meritocracy is still valid and is the reason why people are getting ahead. That's not even the case. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. When it comes to nepotism, it has always been there. And it is not something that only exists in Hollywood or the arts or sports or in these industries, that are front facing, the influencer space now. Basically spaces with high visibility. It exists in every single space, in every single facet, in every single industry in America. It just so happens that Black people are now, over the past few decades, have become a group where you have been able to stabilize yourself in the middle class, in the upper middle class. Black people have been able to establish themselves, and I won't even say have been able to, because we have always seen a Black middle class. We have always seen a Black upper middle class. However, there are more opportunities for Black people in this country to attain wealth in a way that we have never seen before, that is very unprecedented. And now naturally, the wealth that they are attaining will trickle down to their children, their family members, their friends, and create more opportunities for them. We are seeing that now in a way that we have never seen before in history. And I do think that race absolutely plays a factor in the conversation when it comes to Bronny James being in the league, and absolutely when it comes to Blue Ivy, because you cannot ignore the vitriol that surrounds Beyonce, the misogynoir that is always a factor in the equation when it surrounds Beyonce. That same level of vitriol, that misogynoir, that racism will obviously trickle down to Blue Ivy, despite the fact that this is a child we are talking about. Despite the fact that she is tall for her age and she is a child of obviously obviously billionaires and highly visible celebrities, I think that people forget that Blue Ivy is a child, and this is a child that they are talking about. We tend to see this adultification of Black children, but especially Black girls, where they are adultified and viewed as older than they are. So they are not given the luxury, they are not given the comfort, they are not given the protection from certain things that other racial groups of children should be protected from. And I honestly think it's pretty disgusting the way people have talked about Blue Ivy, because whether you think she is talented or not, she is a child. And if you wouldn't want somebody talking about your own child that way, there is no reason why you should be talking about somebody else's child. And so often I hear people say things like, oh, you are opening up yourself to criticism and judgment if you are on the internet, or if you are in any place or position of high visibility where people are seeing you and perceiving you. You are by extension opening up yourself to people's constant criticism or judgment. And I've done a video about this, but absolutely not. Nobody is opening themselves up to vitriol, abuse, and caustic commentary just by showing up and existing in a highly visible space. And if you think that way, that is a sign of, in my opinion, mental illness, and you need to log off, because it is not okay to send hate people's way just because they are occupying a space which you think is highly visible. And I do think that screens have made people way too comfortable and way too overfamiliar sending drive-by hate people's way that they would never say in person, or if they were in front of that person, you know, face to face, they would never say these things. My rule of thumb, how I've always used the internet, how I show up on the internet, how I comment on the internet, even how I post videos and the things that I talk about, if I'm not comfortable sharing it or saying it in front of my husband, my boss, my family, my friends, if I'm not comfortable saying it to their faces, I would never get on the internet and say that. And I think if more people use the internet like that in a more responsible way, we would have a lot less hate and a lot less abuse happening online. But screens, like I said, have made people way too overfamiliar. And I recognize I just got off on a tangent, but I think it's really disgusting the way people are so comfortable being negative and talking negatively about people online, but especially children. And that's exactly what is happening to Blue Ivy. And in part, it is happening because she is a Black girl. Okay, so I got off track a little bit, but it's something that I feel really strongly about. Anyways, when it comes to the recent conversation about nepotism and Nepo babies, specifically around Blue Ivy and Bronny James, I've just noticed a different type of energy behind that conversation. And I really think it is worth exploring, because when it comes to nepotism, what I think more so people have an issue with is not nepotism itself, but that it is not benefiting them. And I also think that people don't have an issue with it when it's not in front of your face. Because if you look at your company or your organization or anywhere you've ever worked at, a lot of people are there because of connections that they have. A lot of people are there because they knew a job opening was coming and they sent it to their friend or someone they know. Now, the difference may have been that the person that they were sending the job vacancy to, they were obviously qualified, and so they went through the interview process and they did get the job. It was not just off of the merit of my boss is my dad or my uncle or whatever. Like my first job out of high school, I was 17 and I was working in my dad's cousin's real estate agency. And I think that my parents just wanted to get me out of the house. That was obviously a job that was granted as a result of nepotism. And I didn't dislike it. If anything, I just found it really boring. And that should have been a sign that I was not cut out for office work. Or maybe it was more so due to the fact that it was a job in real estate and I was not interested at all in the real estate industry. But I did like it. It paid $10 an hour and it was probably one of the more better paying jobs that I had in my youth. But that was a job that was obviously a result of nepotism. And it was just like a secretary role. I would fax things, scan things, organize things. You know, it was a pretty low level job, but obviously if they wanted to advertise that role and fill it with somebody who had more secretarial skills or experience, somebody who was more qualified at the time than me, then yes, they obviously could have done that, but it was not important to them. So I think my dad just talked to his cousin and he was like, hey, I'm trying to get my daughter out of the house so she's not sitting on the computer all day doing whatever. So she's not sitting at home all day. Do you have a job for her? Great. Let me drop her off every Saturday, every Sunday. And I think I was there some days during the week. But anyways, all of this to say that if you look at your life and your experiences or people you know, or even at the job you're in now, there is somebody there, or you yourself may have benefited from nepotism. So I don't necessarily think that people have an issue with nepotism. I just think a lot of people have an issue when they're not benefiting from it, or if it's in your face and the person who is benefiting from the nepotism is really like tone deaf about it, or I got here by the strength of my talent or my skill. I was always gonna be here regardless of who I was connected to and regardless of my family. Jamie Lee Curtis, for example, like I said, she is the final boss of the freaking Nepo babies. And you know what? I'm not really here to dispute her talent one way or the other. I think her acting is very one note, but obviously she's been booking roles for the better part of, I don't know, 4 or 5 decades. So people obviously find her talented, but what's her face? What's the one Jenner girl? The model one, Kendall Jenner. Yeah, Kendall Jenner saying that she would drop off her last name when she went to booking so people wouldn't know she was a Kardashian Jenner. And it's like, girl, do you think they're not gonna know who you are when you show up in the spot? Like, yes, you can drop off your last name, but you're sending out your pictures to these shoots. So of course they're gonna know who you are. It was just ridiculous. But I think like the Nepo babies people really love and don't have issue with, for example, John David Washington, Denzel Washington's son, or Willow Smith. I think people don't necessarily have an issue with those Nepo babies because they're really humble. And not only are they humble, they are actually good at what they do. And, you know, good at what they do is really subjective, you know, and I think that also plays a factor in how people receive Nepo babies, especially Nepo babies in highly visible roles, like, you know, in Hollywood, in music, in art. Subjectiveness also plays a role, and it is a factor in whether people view them in a certain way in the conversation surrounding them. Like I said, I really don't have an issue with nepotism, and I don't have an issue with nepotism because I come from a culture in which your parents want to see you doing better than they did. So any opportunity that they have, they can give you to make sure you get ahead and that you succeed, that's what they're going to do. So because I come from that culture and I come from that background, that is what I am seeing, and that is what I would do. And I would do the same for anybody that was close to me. You know, my siblings, if I have children someday, I would obviously do the same for them. I don't necessarily believe in suffering. I don't think suffering is necessary in order for you to attain a certain level of success or status. Like, yes, I do believe you should have to work hard. And I do think there is obviously value in grit and going through things, and it can shape you, and how it shapes you and makes you appreciative for what you have and what you've been able to accomplish. But at the same time, I think the US is really a culture of not only suffering, but also a culture of meritocracy, that the people at the top that are making the rules, they're telling you how to play the game, and they're giving you all of these rules in order for you to get ahead, but they themselves are not following those rules, and they are cheating to get ahead. And as they're cheating, as they're getting ahead, they're putting their family on, they're putting their friends on, they're putting their associates on. Meanwhile, you, the middle class person, or just the person who is not aware of the fact that they are creating these rules, that they are manipulating the game, you are not getting ahead, and they're telling you you're not getting ahead or you're not winning at the game because you're not trying enough. Meanwhile, they're hoarding all of the resources and constantly changing the rules, so they are 2 steps ahead, and you're over here playing the game thinking that that is what you have to do in order to get ahead. So I don't necessarily believe in the culture of suffering. I don't believe in the culture of meritocracy. And this isn't to say that I do not think people should work hard to get what they have, because I've worked very hard for everything that I have, but I also understand that certain things that have been given to me, or certain opportunities that have been presented to me, have been presented as a result of the connections that I have. But that is the case with everyone, and I don't necessarily think that that is a bad thing, because these connections were not exclusively based off of my family or my friends. It is just that I put myself in the right places at the right times, and I cultivated certain relationships and connections, so when certain opportunities were available, those people would think of me. So I think nepotism can work in different ways. It's not just exclusively your friends and your family members giving you opportunities and you are untalented or you are unskilled skilled. I think it can be a level of both, and we see that with someone like Blue Ivy, who I personally believe is a very talented young lady, and she's working on her craft and she's building her craft. And yes, she has an opportunity to display, you know, she has an opportunity to dance with Beyonce, to dance in the Beyonce Bowl, to dance and to perform at a worldwide blowout concert. She has that opportunity because Beyonce is her mother, but she is not only being granted that opportunity as a result of Beyonce being her mother. There is some talent there. Even then, saying that there is talent there, that is even a conversation that is up for debate, because who gets to decide what talent is, what talent looks like, who is talented and who isn't talented? This is what I talk about when I talk about subjective versus objective. And y'all know I'm a big what? Words mean things person. So when we talk about objective talent is not influenced by personal feelings or opinions in considering and representing facts. It is just what it is. Think about sports, for example, right? To be good in sports, there is a criteria that measures whether someone is good or isn't good. You know, there are rules, there are facts. It is very difficult to manipulate the outcome of these things. You know, obviously if you are cheating, all of these cheating scandals, and you can definitely manipulate the outcome of that. But when something is objective, it is just what it is. So sports, for example, and this is the last real space that we have when it comes to meritocracy. And so when people talk about Bronny James making it to the league and him not being talented enough to be there, that in and of itself can be an objective argument, because when you look at his stats, they're a little confusing. I won't say they're not confusing. I do understand people having a response based on his stats, but am I mad at it? No. And I'm not mad at it because honestly, when you think about it, who is he really impacting, right? Who is Blue Ivy impacting? Blue Ivy is dancing with her mom at the Renaissance tour. Blue Ivy is dancing with her mom at the Beyonce Bowl. She's not taking opportunities from people because Beyonce is the one putting that together. Beyonce is selecting the dancer. So, okay, if Blue Ivy's gonna get this spot, fine. She can create another spot for another dancer to audition and bring them on board if she wanted to. With Bronny James being in the league though, even though I personally feel like I really don't mind it one way or the other. Someone could make an argument that he is taking an opportunity from somebody who is talented, who objectively is talented and did the work to get there and statistically has performed better than Bronny has, to the point where they should be there instead of him, and now he has taken an opportunity from somebody else. I absolutely can see that argument. However, when we talk about sports being a meritocracy, that's not necessarily true, because the people who make it into the league, especially nowadays, they are not necessarily the most talented. Basketball is becoming one of those sports where it's not necessarily based off of your talent, but it is based off of the access you have in terms of material wealth to get you in front of people to display that talent. If you think about the 70s and the 80s and even the 90s of basketball, you just have this raw talent. You just find people who are killing it at the local high school, playing at the court at the park down the street. You're finding people who are really talented in that way. Fast forward the 2000s, 2010s, 2020s, that's not how you're sourcing talent when it comes to basketball. When it comes to basketball and sourcing talent, it starts at a very young age with AAU. It is pay to play. So if you have the resources to get your kid, to pay for your kid to play on one of these leagues, and if you have the resources to pay for them for private coaching, for private training, playing at really good schools, you know, these private schools like the Sierra Canyons that people are coming out of, you're not going to necessarily get the most talent at the top. You're going to get the people who are talented, but that talent has been cultivated because they have the resources to pay for their talent, for their skills to be developed in a way that people who may have been just as talented but did not have the resources, so they're not going to get noticed and they're not going to get as much visibility. This is why I say that even though, yes, sports are objective, it's not necessarily who is in the league that is the best of the best. That is something that I think we left behind in the 90s and the 2000s. That's not the reality of the league in present day. And I don't think it has been for maybe 20-ish years. When it comes to subjective talent as it pertains to Nepo babies, that's a completely different conversation. And I think that that is where people's hypocrisy comes into play. When something is subjective, it is essentially based off of or influenced by your own personal tastes, feelings, or opinions. So it's not rooted in any fact. And this is where I think the conversation is hypocritical, because when it comes to Blue Ivy performing, like I said, I've seen her perform live and I thought she performed pretty well. She is not taking any opportunities from anyone because her mother is the one curating these shows, curating these experiences, hand selecting their dance, hand selecting the talent and the dancers. And if she wanted to create opportunities for more people, she could easily do that. So Blue Ivy being a factor in the equation and her benefiting from nepotism isn't taking from anyone, as opposed to, now I'm going to be very careful because like I said, I think we need to be mindful of how we're talking about children. Juxtapose Blue Ivy subjectively being talented but not taking any opportunities from anyone as a Nepo baby. Compare that to Northwest, who, like I said, I'm going to be very mindful of how I talk about children. Her performance in The Lion King at the Hollywood Bowl, that was subjectively not a good performance. And the reason why I say subjectively is I looked at that performance and I do not think she was good. She is also a child and she has a lot of room to grow, a lot of opportunity to develop that talent. She has a lot of time and a lot of room to grow. It is just in that space, in that moment, her performance was not good. And the only reason why she was there was as a result of her parents' name. She absolutely took an opportunity from someone because that was not something that was curated and put on by Kanye or Kim West. That was not something that they created and could have created more opportunities for somebody else to perform the role of Simba. Northwest took an opportunity from someone who was inarguably more talented than she was, who would have been a better fit for that role. She was not equipped. She did not have the talent to be in the role she was in. And that is a glaring and clear example of a Nepo baby who took an opportunity from someone else who was 110% there, who 110% got that opportunity as a result of who they were and who they knew. That is the type of nepotism, those are the type of Nepo babies, and those are the type of situations where people are generally very upset about. The thing that I find very hypocritical though is because if you look at another example of where there is a Nepo baby or there are Nepo babies taking opportunities from people that is actually doing tangible damage and harm to a great number of people that I don't hear enough people talking about or giving criticism to, was, for example, Donald Trump's children. Donald Trump, when he was president, giving his children positions in the White House, and they were occupying roles that they were ill-equipped to fill, that they were not talented in, that they were not skilled in, and then using those roles as opportunities to line their own pockets on the backs of American people and our tax dollars. That type of nepotism was actively and actually harmful. And I did not hear the same level of vitriol, the same level of criticism, the same amount of people turning up when it came to that as I did with people being so upset about Blue Ivy performing in the Beyonce Bowl. Make it make sense. Make it make sense. People had more energy for an 11-year-old dancing on stage with her mother than 3 adults who were using their position and opportunities to to dupe the American people, to dupe the taxpayers, and profited off of doing so handsomely while exposing the American people to great harm. If people are not going to turn up for that and be more upset about that type of nepotism that actively harms people, then I cannot be bothered to be upset about Bronny James making it to the league. I cannot bother to be upset about Blue Ivy dancing with her mother on stage. This is why I say that when it comes to nepotism and when it comes to these Nepo babies, I really don't care one way or the other. And I think a lot of people are only having energy for it now when it comes to Bronny James and Blue Ivy, because they are Black children finally benefiting from something that white children and children of other racial and ethnic groups have been able to benefit from. I think a lot of people's commentary and criticism comes down to racism, and I think it also comes down to misogynoir, because this world will always be so much harder on Black girls and Black women. If you're going to be upset about nepotism, actively be upset about the type of nepotism that is actively harming people rather than the nepotism that is benefiting an 11, 12-year-old Black girl dancing on stage with her mom and the first father-son duo in the NBA. Bronny being in the NBA is not hurting anyone. Blue Ivy dancing on stage is not hurting anyone. And I think a lot of people's criticisms of nepotism when it comes to these two is absolutely rooted in the dislike a lot of people have for Beyonce and LeBron James, who are very unapologetically loudly Black. LeBron James, who has especially been very vocal, and not just very vocal, but you see how he builds his team. He does so in a way where he is uplifting Black talent and Black voices and building opportunities for Black people. And I think that that honestly riles a lot of people up. And then when you also look at Beyonce, she is again another unapologetically Black entertainer and artist who is platforming the Black woman experience in a way that is unapologetically Black, very Black women first. And I think a lot of people are very upset about that. And so the frustration, the irritation, the ways in which people do not like Beyonce and LeBron James is obviously going to trickle down to their children, and it's going to feed into people's criticism of both of their children. And it's especially going to take center stage when it comes to American culture, because American culture still heavily pushes the myth of meritocracy when anyone with eyes can see that that is not the case. And it hasn't been the case in any industry for a very long period of time. And if you are still playing by the rules, you will forever be destined to lose or still be behind, while the people who are doing well and are getting ahead, they are cheating and they are not playing by the rules. They are putting their people on, always have been and always will be. And so when it comes to nepotism, I definitely, even though I don't really have an issue with nepotism one way or the other, because I do not believe in a culture of suffering, and I also know that meritocracy is a lie, I also can understand people's frustrations surrounding nepotism. However, if you are going to be frustrated about nepotism, be frustrated about it in a way and when it comes to situations that are actively doing the average person harm. While I do think a lot of people's commentary surrounding Nepo babies and Blue Ivy and Bronny James, while I do think that it does come down to bitterness and jealousy, it would be very ignorant and minimizing to just dismiss it as such completely. I do think that yes, there is a lot of jealousy and a lot of bitterness involved, but I also understand that a lot of people are living in scarcity mentality, and we are living in that scarcity mentality because it's really hard to get ahead nowadays. It is really hard to live. We are living in a cost of living crisis, a house of living crisis. The cost of everything is going up. Inflation is wild, while wages are not rising to match that. The middle class is shrinking. We are in class warfare. We are seeing a great divide between the haves and the have-nots. A lot of people are struggling, and it is very frustrating, especially if you are somebody who is in a creative field. You know, you are an actor, you are a singer, you are a musician, you are in some field where it is so much harder to break through now because you have to have connections, and you don't have those connections, but you are so talented, and you see somebody who is not as talented, but they're able to get certain opportunities because of who their dad or their mom is or their uncle is, and they have a certain family name, or they know somebody who knows somebody or who knows somebody. Like, it's really hard and it's very frustrating, and I understand people's bitterness. I understand people's frustrations, but I also think that myopic level of focus on nepotism and the harms of nepotism as it pertains to sports figures or celebrities, again, those people in creative spaces, I think we need to look at the bigger picture and see how nepotism is harming us in a way that is tangible and is so much bigger than sports and celebrity. You know, Hollywood, the film industry, the music industry, nepotism is impacting us at a degree that's bigger than that and is actively doing more harm. And if you're gonna turn up and you're gonna be mad about it, that's fine, but also don't be a hypocrite. Don't only be upset or don't only wanna have the conversation when it comes to Black kids who are finally benefiting from nepotism. Meanwhile, you have white kids who have been benefiting from it forever, and kids from other racial and ethnic groups who are benefiting from nepotism as well. Be upset about it across the board, not just when it comes to these Black kids. Because if you were in a position where you could give your children, your nieces, your nephews, your cousins, your family, your friends, if you could give them the same opportunities, you absolutely would. And if somebody says they wouldn't, I'm gonna say you're a liar. You're either a liar or you're somebody who really wants to see your people struggle, and I don't know what to say about that. It could not be me though. If I had any opportunity to put my siblings on, to put my nieces on, to put my nephews on, to do anything to make their life a little bit easier, their life a little bit better, I'm absolutely going to do so. But I think that also may be a cultural difference. Your miles may vary. Nepotism is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. But if you're going to be mad about it, be mad about it across the board. And that's all I got to say about that. So drop down in the comments. Let me know your thoughts, your feelings, your opinions. Am I right? Am I wrong? If you had the opportunity to put your people on, would you not? Why not? I want to hear it all because I find this conversation so fascinating. So drop down in the comments and let me know. If you're not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button. And until next time, peace out.